Good evening, everyone. So happy you could be here. I'm Natalie Wagner, the president, and we are very honored to have this event in this beautiful church with the famous Gustavino tiles, which everybody has seen, I'm sure. I especially want to welcome Eve Queller, whom we all know. And we're so pleased that some people who work at the Met took tonight off because Kristen Chenoweth is at the Met tonight, and they came to hear their chorus masters. I think it's just wonderful. One event from our seminar on Meistersinger is now on our free and permanent WSNY YouTube channel. Jeffrey Swan's lecture, Dynamic Tension in Meistersinger. I'm sure most of you were there or received it live stream. He's a treasure. Other events from the seminar will be there. Unfortunately, there was a technical difficulty with the live stream for tonight, so we will send it to anyone who registered for the live stream by tomorrow. It's all being taken care of. We will announce events for 2022 very soon. They include a recital by the aforementioned Jeffrey Swan, and a lecture on Strauss by John Muller, to note the 2 Strauss operas coming up at the Met. We thank Susan Brodie for hosting this event. She is a reviewer for Classical Voice North America, and she is our indispensable social media director. Susan, thank you.
It's my great honor to interview Donald Palumbo, the wonderful Met chorus master. He really needs no introduction, I'm sure, but just to jog your memories a bit. Mr. Palumbo arrived at the Met in 2007 after 15 years as chorus master at the Lyric Opera of Chicago and previous positions in Dallas, St. Louis, Boston, and elsewhere. He has led choruses all over Europe and was the first American chorus master at the Salzburg Festival. Soon after his arrival at the Met, critics took notice. In his first season, he was cited as one of the genuine heroes of a new production of Macbeth for his work with the rejuvenated-sounding Met Chorus. Of Peter Grimes, which was performed a few months later, Opera News wrote, "The evening became a showpiece for the Met's choristers, revitalized this season under Donald Palumbo. The overpowering sound they produced on the climactic cries of Grimes registered as the hammer strokes of doom." What were your goals when you first took over the chorus?
Well, it's funny you bring back memories of my first season. When they told me the repertoire that was planned for the first season, my jaw dropped. There was a new production of Macbeth, a new production of Peter Grimes, Mano Lescaut, Hernani, you name it. Almost the first Emperor actually was making a return at the end of the year. War and Peace was going to come back for a few performances, and I was like, I didn't know how I was going to get through that rep. And about 2 weeks after I had agreed to come to New York, I got a call from Peter Galvin. He said, "I've just seen this wonderful new production of Satyagraha in London, and we're going to do it next year at the Met." And I said, "Peter, where are you going to put Satyagraha in the middle of this season?" He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. We're adjusting everything. We'll move everything around." I said, "Are you going to eliminate another huge chorus opera from the repertoire?" He said, no, we'll just squeeze it in somehow. So I don't know if Satyagraha had been on the plate right off the bat, whether I would have thought twice about coming here. But in any case, I was fortunate to come to New York in that first season and have that kind of vast repertoire to experiment with the Met Chorus, and we had everything possible to sing that season. Trying to remember what Wagner there would have been that year. I may have been Tristan. I'm not sure, but we certainly didn't do any big Wagner that year. Thank goodness. I don't know how we would have done it, but I think when you come into a new chorus, the first year is really listening to everybody, not making any rash judgments right off the bat about how to proceed down the road. Take stock of the talent that you have in the chorus and try to figure out a plan for moving ahead. And as I say, that first year was a blur. I don't know how we got through that one.
Did you have personnel to replace?
There was not a lot of personnel to replace. The Met Chorus is unusual in that we're always performing so many pieces in repertoire, Bohème, Tosca, Traviata, Carmen. If we were to take a huge, let's say, personnel change in any one year, it would probably be to the detriment of all those standard repertoire pieces that I know my choristers can get up on stage and sing those pieces at a drop of a hat. Even a piece as difficult as Turandot at the Met. We do it every 2 years, and I think you'd be shocked to find out how little rehearsal time we get to prepare Turandot on an annual basis. So
Shock us. How little rehearsal time do you really have?
Probably 3.5, 2.5, 3 hour musical rehearsals maybe, and then one day on stage with piano for Act 1, and then another 3-hour rehearsal maybe for the rest of the opera, one orchestra run through, and then the final dress. For an extremely difficult chorus opera. And of course, if you come into the Met and you're new and you get Turandot in that first year, it's pretty scary to go on stage knowing that a lot of that music has not been as carefully rehearsed as you would like to. When we do a piece like Meistersinger, which had been out of the repertoire, I think, for 7 or 8 years, in that time, we have a huge turnover in the extra chorus. And of course, Meistersinger, we have close to 70 extra choristers augmenting the regular chorus. There's a huge turnover there. So with a piece like Meistersinger, it's basically treated as a new production, even though it's not. But from a time point of view, there's no way you can expect a chorister who hasn't sung Meistersinger in 7 years to walk on stage without a good amount of rehearsal time. So scheduling at the Met is always a bit of a juggling process. You want to make sure you give enough time to new pieces. Eurydice, Fire Shut Up in My Bones. This opening of this season has been very difficult for us. But thrown into that mix was Turandot with those 2 new productions, and then putting together the Porgy chorus anew at the same time, and then, of course, Meistersinger thrown into the mix within the first month of our season. So each year has its own problems. This year, of course, was extremely difficult given the fact that we were starting really from ground level zero when we all came back to the house. I personally, I couldn't believe that we were actually coming back. As late as, I want to say, June, I had my doubts. And I certainly never thought we were going to be able to pull off a Verdi Requiem with 120 choristers, and then a month later, say, a Meistersinger with 149 choristers, when we hadn't been more than 2 or 3 people in a room for a year and a half. So it's been an amazing year starting up from where we were 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
Yes, indeed. Could you speak a little about what's different this year with the COVID restrictions and requirements?
Well, first of all, we do all our rehearsals masked until we get on stage with the orchestra. And of course, we sing performances and dress rehearsals, orchestra rehearsals, unmasked completely. It's really not enough time to get balances worked out completely, because to hear 150 people on stage with a mask, you can tell that there's a bit of a dulling in the sound. The text is much more difficult to understand. You need the clarity of just being able to project. And here, when you've got this mask right here, it's very hard to get an idea about the size of the sound at any given time. But I think we've handled it well. At the Met, we are mandatory testing twice a week. The saliva test, which means a lot of cost is being put forth to keep us all safe in the house. Everybody, of course, has to be vaccinated, and we've had very few positive tests, but we have had some, and I think everybody has the feeling now, especially, that maybe we're going on a day-by-day basis when you're hearing about some of the Broadway shows that have had to close down for a bit. But I think everybody that works at the Met feels very safe, though. And I think Peter really insisted that that be the top priority now. We sit in List Hall to rehearse, so we really are not observing social distancing. Where were we going to rehearse Meistersinger? In a football field? I don't know. With social distancing, there was no way we could have pulled that off. But so I think we're in pretty good shape in dealing with COVID right now. But that's, day by day.
Tell us more about Meistersinger. I think we're all still glowing from the event.
I think it's one, as we were talking the other day, I think it's one of the greatest accomplishments in all of Western civilization, art, humanity, everything, to think of this piece being created by one man, all of these components, text, music, and you sit and listen to it and your jaw just drops. It's just, I can't imagine one man even writing all those notes down. Even the piano vocal score, let's say, it's just crammed full of 16th notes and a million different rhythms and text. And I'm just overwhelmed every time I hear it, let alone work on the piece. My first performance of it was in Chicago with Christian Thielemann conducting. And I had spent the summer before in Bayreuth studying the piece with Norbert Balach, who was the great chorus master at Bayreuth, just an amazing man, and we became quite good friends. And so then I came back to Chicago, and this was going to be my first Meistersinger and it was Christian Thielemann, who, for me, is probably the greatest Wagner conductor of our generation, I feel. But in any case, we got to the first rehearsal, and it was a Lehrbuben rehearsal with the tenors and the mixture of second sopranos and altos. And everything that they sang was wrong for him. Everything. There was not one thing that was right. And I remember walking to my car in the parking lot saying, "Oh my goodness, how do I get out of this? Is there any way to withdraw from this production gracefully?" I felt so horrible. And we came back the next day, and of course we had no intervening rehearsal, and everything was right. And
so this was a posture.
It was a bit of a test. It was a bit of a, let's see how this chorus can stand up, and get through, maybe criticism, or how does this chorus master deal with fixing things if Maestro wants something different. I mean, he wanted everything different. I would have had to start all over. So long notes were too long. Short notes were too short. The diction was wrong. It was one thing after another. But I think it was just not so much as a test, but just as a way of seeing what do I have to work with here? How flexible are these people? And how hard is this chorus master willing to work? And from that day on, it was one of the most amazing experiences in my life. My first Meistersinger with this amazing conductor. The funny story about this performance was that it would have been Wolfgang Wagner, not Wieland, Wolfgang Wagner, whom I met in Bayreuth when I was working with Maestro Balázs, came over for a performance because at that time he was interested in Christian Thielemann possibly doing conducting work in Bayreuth. This is long before Christian Thielemann was appointed music director in Bayreuth or Vienna or all of these big spots. So Wolfgang came over. And I met him before the performance, and I mean, he was a very humble, sweet man. And I got into my position to conduct the chorale for the opening of Meistersinger, which we sang in that production, similar to what we do at the Met. We're sort of facing off stage, and so I'm actually on stage at that point, in what could be the pulpit in a way of the church setting, conducting the chorus for that chorale. So in Chicago, they were also on stage, and I was watching a television monitor up on a ladder, and they were down from me, and so I was conducting. Well, they had given Wolfgang Wagner a seat in the front row, right over Christian Thielemann's shoulder. And his face, I'm sure you've seen pictures of it, but his face in that funny lighting of a black and white television with him sitting in the dark, it looked just like Richard Wagner. And I looked at the television and my heart was like all the way up in my throat, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to look at this all night long. I'm not sure I could continue. But and at the end of the performance, I told him, I said, it was so strange for me. He got such a chuckle out of that. He thought that was the funniest thing imaginable, and that in the photo of this television screen, he looked like his grandfather. It's the other thing when you think about it. He was the grandson of Wagner, and so my connection with Meistersinger started then. And then, of course, I did it with Maestro Levine after I came to the Met, and then this last time with Maestro Papano. So I think I have done my 3 Meistersingers with probably maybe the 3 best conductors I could have chosen in a way, and each one of them different. Each one of the performances different. Tony Papano's Meistersinger had an Italian flow to it, and a not delicacy, but just this finesse, this I don't know how to explain it. It felt classical in a way almost. Maestro Levine's was just earthy. It was just stately, majestic, grand. Maestro Thielemann's was extended and suspended, and you felt that some of the phrases were just never going to end. I remember it was Nancy Gustafson, I think. Yes, Nancy Gustafson. Or was it Emily McGee? No, I can't. It was Nancy. Saying, Maestro, I can't sing the beginning of the quintet like this. I have to take 4 breaths in the first phrase. He said, well, of course you do. You have to sing, don't you? He said, breathe when you need to breathe. This is not a test of your breath support. This is a test of being expressive with the phrasing. And so here I've had really all these extremes of preparing Meistersinger in 3 different productions as well. No, 2 different productions. The Met production was not new. Yeah.
But 3 different conductors.
3 different conductors and totally different conductors.
Did you have experience with Meistersinger at Bayreuth?
No, I was a visitor.
Okay.
There's another story. My first day in Bayreuth, Maestro Balázs brought me into the chorus rehearsal. And it was, I believe, it was the first week, because it was at the beginning of the summer. And I sat down, and there were 120 people or something, and, they started with Meistersinger, and they got to the first chorale. And he gave the downbeat, and the sound, I just said, oh my, I've died, and this is now, I'm going to be treated to this sound for the rest of my life. It was just the most glorious sound. I mean, you have all of the best hand-picked singers of all the theaters in Germany comprising this chorus. They have this music in their bones. It's just, it was the most amazing thing. And I went to him afterwards. I said, what is there to rehearse? This is just so outrageous. He said, oh, you'll see. And lo and behold, they worked every note and the intonation of every chord. The chorale, I have notes in my score from his rehearsals. This note high, this note low, this vowel not quite so close. And it was just an eye-opening experience.
Is that precision because of the acoustic at Bayreuth?
Well, I just think it's also, Bayreuth just demands that everything be at the absolute highest level it could possibly be. Of course, the acoustics in Bayreuth, I'm sure most of you have been there. The acoustics are just crystal clear. You hear everything. And I just think that's how music is treated at Bayreuth. It's one of the greatest experiences of my life, just sitting in that chorus room, listening to them sing. That year, they were preparing Meistersinger, Dutchman, Parsifal, and The Ring. Tristan? No, and The Ring. Yeah. So I had a great education while I was eating and drinking in Bayreuth.
Are there special conditions in that theater that require practices of timing?
Yes, the
that
timing in the
different?
theater is very, very different because of the way the sound reaches the stage from the orchestra pit. There's a huge amount of mixing, and the chorus is directed basically to not follow the conductor at all, but to follow the chorus masters in the proscenium, who are experts at doing the anticipation and figuring out when to put the sound exactly. It's very disturbing. It's very difficult. I'm sure, Maestro Scholti had a horrible time at Bayreuth because he could not get used to the bizarre sound of the sound having to travel up, over, and then out. And so definitely the chorus masters at Bayreuth have been there, the assistants have been there for many, many years. And it's funny, the chorus masters in Bayreuth last a long time. Wilhelm Pitz was the chorus master before Norbert Balach, and I actually sang a Mahler 8 that he prepared when I was living in Vienna, way long time ago. And I think Maestro Pitz was there for most of the post-war years. And then Maestro Balach came in, and I'm going to forget the young guy's name, Friedrich, I believe his name is, who's now, after Maestro Balach left, has now been the chorus master. So since the war, I believe there have only been 3 chorus masters at Bayreuth. The war, World War II. I mean, I'm sorry I even, I'm dating myself in a way here.
Yeah, well, much of Bayreuth's contemporary history dates from that war in particular.
Yep.
I've heard you talk about the chorus in Meistersinger, and you always say there are 149 choristers, not 150.
I have a feeling that the first year that Schenk production was done at the Met, the number was 150, and someone may have been on a leave of absence that year, and they had 149, and the Met is extremely tradition-bound and hard to change things, and so that number is what's come down to me.
Okay. Now, is that the core chorus plus extras?
The core chorus is 8. Well, it is now 74. We did just a little bit of a reduction in the size of the full chorus at this past year, the negotiations. It means that the number of full-time choristers has dropped down from 80 to 74. But don't worry, that does not mean that we are putting fewer singers on stage. I'm making up the difference in the numbers with extra choristers It's just a financial consideration that had to happen at some point. We've resisted it a lot longer than most other companies around the world, and my former company, the Lyric in Chicago, has really had a huge cut in regular chorus numbers. But so we're now at 74, but if Meistersinger calls for 149 and that production comes back, there will be 149 people on that stage. Peter has been great in supporting what I feel are the necessary numbers for operas at the Met. The Aida number will not change. The Turandot number will not change. It's just that the full-time chorus has shrunk a little bit.
And as we were discussing the other day, they're bringing a new repertoire which perhaps requires fewer choristers and smaller orchestras as well. I think that's just a general condition.
Yeah, well,
in the industry.
we're always prepared to go to whatever size we need to for the particular opera. We do Mozart operas with, I think, as few as 20 sometimes. The Eurydice, for example, where we're down in another room and singing via microphones and me conducting it from a television, we use 48 singers only for that production. Fire Shut Up had 38. Oftentimes we take productions from other theaters that have, a lot smaller resources. Fire Shut Up and My Bones came from St. Louis. Now, if any of you have been to Opera Theater of St. Louis and think about what the difference is between the dimensions of that theater and the Metropolitan Opera, the set had to be enlarged, and the ensemble numbers, the choristers, that was also enlarged for Fire. Same thing with the Porgy. We took Porgy from English National Opera, English National Opera, and we added, I think, 12 more people just because the theater is so big. But the Wagner operas at the Met, the numbers basically came from Maestro Levine. Most of the productions that I've inherited, those numbers were set by Maestro Levine. If anyone knew that theater and the numbers and the requirements to make pieces work in that theater, it was Maestro Levine. So next year for Lohengrin, we will be observing 80 men and 50 women. That's the number from the previous production of Lohengrin at the Met. Again determined by Maestro Levine.
So that's from the previous production, even though it's a new production from
Right.
Mariinsky?
Yeah. They're doing it right. They're working on it right now.
Yeah.
In Russia, and Francois Girard is going to direct the production. I've seen the set designs and the costume designs. It looks really beautiful. It's sort of along the lines of the Parsifal, not the Flying Dutchman so much. More the look of the Parsifal, which I thought was quite beautiful. But as far as the numbers go, Francois said to me, "What numbers do you want to use?" So I go back and I look through the records, and usually we'll come back with the numbers that were used before. There have been a few things that I've changed. Norma, I thought the men were having to sing a little bit too much in Normica, and they were only they were at 30 men instead of the full 42. And again, Peter has been great in trusting my musical knowledge with the chorus, and been very supportive just to make sure the musical standards at the Met continue to be the Met's musical standards. That can't change.
You're having quite a run of Francois Girard productions with Wagner.
Yeah. We get into that sometimes. We've had a number of directors that have done a lot of productions at the Met. Bart Schur is right now doing a new Rigoletto to replace Las Vegas. And Bart has done a lot of productions at the Met. And again, it's people that work well in our theater, that as far as Francois goes, he has an incredible knowledge of the music. He has every word translated. He can sing along to anything that you need to rehearse. And he spends a lot of time developing the storyboard, so to speak, of the operas that he directs. And so I'm very happy having him do Lohengrin. Again, it will be a ritualistic approach. And that's kind of the best way to do Lohengrin, quite frankly, because with that many people on stage, there's not much you can do. You can't really be running around on stage. I'm sure some of you remember the Wieland Wagner production of Lohengrin, which was my first Lohengrin when I came to the Met. And the chorus was in a semicircle. It was blue. I remember this beautiful blue background. And they just stood there for all of Act One on risers. And the men had swords. The women, I don't know how they stood still for as long as they had to. But Lohengrin, I think, just lends itself to that kind of an approach, unlike Meistersinger. Meistersinger, people have to move. And the tricky part about Meistersinger is to get 149 people in the second scene of the third act. You've got to devise a set that has spaces, you have to allow for the procession, and yet everybody has to see the conductor, everyone has to have contact with the Meisters, with Beckmesser, and I mean, for me, the Schenk production, I love it. I know it's old-fashioned and it's come up for some criticism, but I just think it serves the piece so well. The second act, the way that street has that huge elevation, and the end of the second act of Meistersinger is one of the most notoriously complex, difficult 2.5 minutes of music ever written. The amount of time you spend rehearsing that scene compared to the length of time that it takes in the theater, and all you need is one moment where the gears start to crank or just get a little off, and before you know it, you've got total chaos. Now, we never had an instance of that in this run, but I will say there were some performances that lined up absolutely 16th note vertically all the way through, which is almost a miracle. And there are some performances where this section wasn't quite as crisp or together as it could have been. But again, the set is so perfect because you can put the Meister in the middle, Beckmesser and Sachs right in the middle. They get Walter and Eva can be under that little area over there, and they're not in the way. They're not going to get run over by all these people. You have supers coming in and doing all the fighting, basically, because if you had the chorus neighbors, say, doing all that fighting, there's no way that musically that section is going to line up. So basically the chorus neighbors, which is 4-part women's writing and 2-part men's writing, plus a group of Meisters apart from the named Meisters in that scene, and the Lehrbuben, 4 parts Lehrbuben. So you got you've got about 13 vocal lines just within the chorus. And yet in that set, you can place people in elevations and on sides of the stage. So it really is a concert setup, but it doesn't look like a concert setup. It's basically that semicircle of people, and yet it looks like it's just total chaos, which is what it's supposed to sound like, and it usually is. Again, the rehearsals for it are so complicated because you have to rehearse each group separately. The chorus women in 4 parts, which is probably the most difficult of the segments. Again, my Bayreuth experience is great because in Bayreuth they had their own score of what each line sings. Now, this is going to take a minute to explain. The way it's written, the way Wagner wrote it, soprano 1, soprano 2, soprano 3, soprano 4. Many times they'll sing, the soprano 1s will sing a phrase and there'll be maybe 2 bars rest, and then they'll come in and sing another phrase while the second sopranos have music of their own to sing. It's much easier to keep singing than to count empty beats and empty bars. So Bayreuth has let's say a Bible score of the Meistersinger Act 2 finale, in which there is a roadmap. If you're a soprano 1, you sing soprano 1 for here, and then you drop down to the third soprano, and you sing there for a while, then you come back up to first, and then you go down to 4, so that it minimizes the amount of empty beats you have. Now you think, well, don't you have a chance to breathe? Well, yes, there'll always be a space to breathe, but even if you find you're singing a huge long phrase, it's much easier to leave out a note, take a breath, and go on with your line if you have learned this melodic sequence that lasts 2.5 minutes without pauses. And so I was able to sit in a room all by myself with the Bible, and I copied everything over into my score, and then came back to Chicago and created my own copies of the Bayreuth way to sing the end of Act 2 of Meistersinger. And it makes a huge difference. The other thing is, instead of having 20 women singing 2 bars and then 20 other women singing 2 bars, you've got 40 women singing 4 bars. So you've got more sound going through it. And you can play with the dynamics better. You can say, okay, now that we've got 40 here, if it's marked piano here, we don't have to go really, we can be comfortable and not have to worry too much about dynamics with a small group of 20 people. We have much more flexibility. And the same thing with the men's lines. There's a way to do it so that you can start singing, was ist das für Zanken in Streit, ist das für Zanken in Streit, da gibt's gewiss noch Schlägerei, but you see, you can keep going, and basically it's built on 16th notes. Da, 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 and you could just keep singing 16th notes for 2.5 minutes, all the text comes out, and you're done, and that's that. And then you can go back to your dressing room and relax. But it is the most difficult 2.5 minutes of any opera I know.
Wow. But so that's how you're doing it at
So
at the Met.
that's how
Yeah.
I've always done it.
So at the Met, well, in Meistersinger, the choral parts are the beginning,
Yes.
chorale,
Yep.
then the mob scene at the end of Act 2. What am I missing?
Well, you're missing the Lehrbuben.
Yeah.
The small group of tenors, and it's marked alti, but the tessitura is pretty crazy, including up to a high B, I think. So what is done in Bayreuth is to do a mix of alti, but also some second sopranos that have the top. And it's at the Met we use 10 and 10, and I think Bayreuth was 12 and 12 or something. I can't quite remember, but 10 men, 10 women, and they sing the scene at the beginning of the first act, that big long scene with David. They're basically the apprentices. They're young Davids, and they at the Met it's so great because they build the whole. The whole box where Beckmesser is going to listen to the testing, and so they're on stage running around all the time, and they have a lot of vocal interjections in the first act, and then they go up on the gallery and listen for a while, and then come back at the end and they sing at the very end of Act 1. Then they open Act 2. Right. Johannistag, with the garlands and all that stuff. That's just at the very beginning of Act 2 for about, I want to say 5 minutes, and that is also brutally difficult, especially because now they do have to run around. They have to be the ones dancing and everything. So, and again, this kind of action you don't have in Parsifal. You don't have in Lohengrin. I mean, who's going to jump around in Lohengrin? It's crazy. But in Meistersinger, because it's about real people and real human activity and interaction, the Lehrbuben really have to bear the brunt of the activity for us. Then the end of the second act, and then the whole final scene. It's not nearly as much music as Lohengrin, but it's extremely difficult. And again, it's fussy. It's not grand choral writing. It's conversation. The phrases rhyme, even for the chorus. The chorus is singing rhymes all the time. So the diction has to be absolutely perfect, and the rhythms, of course, intonation, all the things that we have to worry about all the time. But for some reason, I always feel with Wagner, you have to up your game. It just demands the best. Not that we don't give the best all the time. There's just something about Wagner, for me, that I just adore working on it.
Well, I think you gave us all goosebumps with that Wach auf at the end.
Oh yeah,
in Act 3.
That's a scary moment, because it comes out of dead silence. Okay, so you don't have any rhythm before it to really feel 1, 2, 3, Wach. There's no orchestra melody to follow. It's silent, and then this gesture that has to generate a block of sound that has no fuzz around the edges. You need to hear the V strongly, and you need the change from V to A to happen exactly at the same moment for everyone on stage, including the soloists. The solo meisters should sing Wach auf as well, and they did with us. But you have to make it only works if it's absolutely clean. And then the other great thing is the cutoff. That's just as exciting. Wach, and then you have to do it again, because you got to do auf with the breath in between the two words. So and then you have to get a diphthong. You have to go from to an o sound, and then you need an F, okay? And this is always hard to get. An F, a consonant F is very difficult to project. So you have to plan and see how much F you can get out without it sounding ridiculous. Because an F can go on forever. But that's the test with Wach. And then it's staying in. Then it's the intonation of this chorale that is just very high for the sopranos and so beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. Compare and contrast. How about the choral writing in Parsifal is a different order.
Yeah. The choral writing in Parsifal, believe it or not, a lot of it is unison. A lot of it is these two groups in the Grail scenes, basically two divided the choruses. The men are divided in half, and for much of Parsifal, the chorus is singing in unison. The actual harmonic beauty comes in with those offstage voices, the way they intertwine with the stage. And at the Met, we use the domes for the children and the high voices, and then the tenors and the altos are off stage, and that's really where the harmonies start to crunch, where the different choruses overlap. But basically, when the men come in the third act of Parsifal, for example, Geleiten wir in Bergen den Strand, those are just unison melodies, and they go back and forth between both groups. But harmonically, it's not nearly as fascinating as Meistersinger. I mean, Meistersinger, the writing is just so much more dense in a way.
But it must be trickier to make expressive. I mean, it's sort of the narrow amitus of the writing, and then
in Parsifal,
sort of, snarly.
Yeah.
Gnarly.
But again, when you have unison writing for a chorus, it has to all be about the text and the colors of the vowels. You can't let the harmony generate the beauty. You've got to find a way to sing unison lines with 40 men. It's like Verdi, Va Pensiero. Va Pensiero is basically unison. Same thing. everybody talks about that as being a great chorus. Well, the middle section, yes, is harmonized. The arpador de fati, that's harmonized. But the bookends of Va Pensiero is everybody singing unison. So in a situation like that with Parsifal, the expression has to come from the text, the colors of the vowels, the weight of the tone, and the uniformity. It's very hard when you've got 40 men singing unison to get that clarity of the diction throughout the entire tessitura. You know, sometimes those phrases go up to high E flats, and the men have to be able to scale that back and not just have a big, wide open sound on the top. The text won't read, it won't blend with your other singers. So even though harmonically it may be very simple, it's a long rehearsal process to get those melodies pure and strong.
Moving away from Wagner just a little bit, do you have a wish list for chorally oriented works that you'd like to direct? Operas?
I would love to do Palestrina, the Pfitzner Palestrina. When I lived in Vienna in the early 70s, it was in the repertoire, and I saw 4 or 5 performances of it. It's basically it's the Council of Trent, right? I don't want to misspeak now. My musicology goes out the window. It's basically all men except for maybe 2 women, and it's a huge, huge cast. But the end of Act 1, where Palestrina is inspired to write one of his masses, and the angels appear, and he has this vision, is one of the most beautiful choral things ever. And I've always wanted to do it, and I don't think I'm going to get that wish in my lifetime. I think it's just too expensive, and I even think in Europe right now it's passed back out of favor. But if you get a chance, there's a beautiful recording of it I think it's with Gedda and Fischer-Dieskau, and at that time every known bass, every famous bass or baritone is in the cast, because there's the whole group of cardinals. There's this whole, there must be 40 solo parts in it. But it's just a very moving piece, and chorally it's just amazing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I haven't done.
Die Soldaten?
No, thank you. No. I saw Die Soldaten in Boston when Sarah Caldwell did it back when I was there. Mm-hmm. I saw half of Die Soldaten, I will admit. I just couldn't withstand the assault. Pieces like that are very difficult for an audience. You get one crack at it, and you sit and you listen to it. And I like to say that the problem with a lot of contemporary opera is it's not accessible to an audience sitting and coming in and just hearing it in one fell swoop. There are a lot of pieces, very complicated contemporary pieces, that at first confrontation you don't get it, but then you study it. For me, Rake's Progress, I thought it was clever, but it wasn't until I really worked on Rake's Progress that I was really touched and moved by it. I don't know how many of you have seen Eurydice. Eurydice, for me, has been a great experience because I think the piece is accessible to someone sitting and listening to it for the first time. I mean, you may disagree with me, I don't know. But the vocal writing is interesting. The orchestration is just outrageously varied and exciting. The text is really touching, and I think the piece is very accessible, whereas some of the contemporary things that I've done, maybe L'amour de loin, for example, that was a hard piece to listen to for me for the first time I listened to it before I started working on it. So I think new music needs to have that one level of accessibility. You can't turn the listeners off immediately within the first 10 minutes, because I think it's hard to get them back. sitting in a performance of an opera that you don't know. I mean, luckily we have the titles at the Met, which, can you imagine those days when they didn't exist? I mean, we're so used to them now. When I think about pieces like the Addis, Exterminating Angel, if you didn't have that text to read, I don't know how you could possibly follow any of that story with the difficult vocal writing and, again, the loudness of some of the orchestration. So at least we have now these titles, and I think Eurydice with the titles projected onto the walls of the set, I just really am in admiration of Matt, the work he did on that piece. How did we get there? Oh, I was talking about, contemporary.
Yeah.
Wish list. I don't know.
Or not necessarily contemporary wish list, but any other big repertoire piece.
Oh, I think I've done all my pieces. Trying to think. I can't. Believe it or not, the Lohengrin is going to be my first one, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I was telling Susan, you get into a lot of your repertoire that as a chorus master you're confronted with is you have to do what the company says you're going to do in any given season. And I have missed Lohengrin productions in about 3 different cities by going somewhere else. On the other side of the coin, I have done 3 different full productions of Les Troyens, which, you know, most people, if they get 1 production in the course of their career of Les Troyens, I've also done 5 Peter Grimes, which is, you know, it's just a quirk. And until I came to the Met, I had never done Fanciulla, the Puccini, and you know that now I'm doing. So I am so excited to be doing Lohengrin. I can't tell you.
Finally.
And because it's one of the pieces I remember from coming to the Met that first season of 1966. That was when the Wieland Wagner production was brand new, and it was Ingrid Bjoner that I saw, and Sándor Kónya was the tenor, and Christa Ludwig was the Ortrud. And I will never forget the curse in the second act, where the audience just went ballistic in the middle of the performance when she finished that curse in the second act. And it was that beautiful Wieland Wagner production, the blue, shimmering, it was just extraordinary. So I'm looking forward to Lohengrin.
Looking toward the future, you're working with young artists in a number of settings.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at Santa Fe and at Glimmerglass, and for the last 5 years you've worked at Juilliard in the vocal arts department. How do you give young singers a boost? How do you help them look at the future?
It's funny you use that term right now, because the time of the pandemic, there were a lot of young singers really suffered incredibly. The seniors at Juilliard, let's say, who had all these engagements coming up, leaving school and going and doing something, or their last full performance at Juilliard, which was to be a Bohème production, which was canceled. A lot of them needed boosting during the pandemic, and the Zoom coaching and Zoom voice lessons were extremely difficult. It's not the same thing, especially with the voice teachers. I think the coaches had a little easier, because you could say, look, we're not going to sing, we're just going to talk about the music. We're going to open the score, and we're going to look at this text, and we're going to look at the diction issues. We're going to sing phrases isolated by themselves. We're going to talk about the shaping of the aria, but you can't actually think that you're going to stand up in front of a little microphone without a pianist and sing a cappella some aria and feel satisfied. And the kids that accepted that and just used the time to really work on their musical skills and and not get upset by the fact that their teacher was not in the same room. I had a couple of kids who really did very well in the Zoom setting. One that I'm so proud of, who won the Nürnberg song competition, and she basically just spent the entire time of the pandemic working on this difficult song repertoire. Without a pianist in the room, just going back and forth with me and a couple of other coaches at Juilliard. They really need boosting right now. And I feel, I'm so lucky to have been doing this for as long as I have. I felt really compelled during the pandemic to make sure that I gave whatever I could to young singers, because unless they continue to develop and thrive and not stagnate for that time period, my whole trade was going to suffer. So I gave as much time as I could, and for some of them it was an amazing experience. Now that we're back in Juilliard live, so to speak, it's just so much fun. You have a coaching room, and I'm masked, and the pianist may be masked, and the singer takes off their mask, and it's like, it's like a rebirth over there. It was hard on a lot of singers who really have had to put launching their career on hold for basically 16 months, and now starting up again. The ones that didn't go stagnant are going to really move ahead, I hope. I've heard great things about small regional companies doing things now. So I think opera's back. I don't think the pandemic is going to knock us out. And the audiences at the Met have been just amazing. Many houses are close to sold out. The orchestra, the conductor walks out into takes the podium, and the crowd they go crazy every night. And I think it's because there's so many people that are probably coming to their first performance back after all this time. It's just, it's thrilling to be working in the arts right now.
Thank you so much for some enlightenment and secrets of the Met.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for coming out. It's so good to have family again and the context of what we do.